Imagine this. The sweet aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafts through an otherwise silent Sunday morning, sunlight streaming through the kitchen windows, casting a warm, deceptive glow. But the serenity masks a storm about to break. The end? Oh, it will be a grand one, where betrayal meets its match, and the truth, once caged, will soar high, leaving destruction in its wake for the betrayer. Elena hummed softly to herself, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug, the morning sunlight catching in her eyes, giving them an almost ethereal glow. The peace of this moment was a stark contrast to the chaos that awaited. The kitchen was warm, a sanctuary of sorts, with the scent of baking bread from the oven adding to the domestic bliss. Yet, this tranquility was about to be shattered. The sound of the front door slamming jolted Elena from her reverie. It was her son, Lucas, his face flushed, eyes wide with a mix of confusion and urgency. He stood there, his teenage frame rigid, clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. "Mom," Lucas started, his voice a whisper, the kind that precedes bad news. "I saw Dad with someone else." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. The room seemed to spin, the warmth of the kitchen turning into a stifling heat. She gripped the counter for support, her mind racing. "With who?" she managed, her voice barely audible over the pounding in her ears. "With Samantha, the Realtor," Lucas said, his voice cracking under the weight of his discovery. He recounted how he had gone to the address of the supposed new home listing, expecting to meet his father for a family decision. Instead, he had peered through the window to see Mark, his father, in an intimate embrace with Samantha, the woman who had been in their home, laughing over dinners, discussing their future. Elena's heart sank, her world tilting on its axis. She pictured the scene, the laughter, the excuses, the late nights Mark claimed were spent at work. It all aligned now, a puzzle she hadn't wanted to solve. The kitchen, once a place of love and laughter, now felt like the scene of a crime, the air thick with betrayal. Lucas stood there, unsure, his protective instincts kicking in, seeing his mother's face pale, her usual composure crumbling. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, moving closer, his teenage bravado replaced by a son's concern. Elena took a deep breath, the shock slowly giving way to a burgeoning resolve. She looked at her son, seeing not just the boy he was, but the ally he would become in the fight ahead. The morning, which had begun with such deceptive calm, had now set the stage for a battle of wills, truths, and the reclaiming of her dignity. The story was just beginning, but the end was clear in Elena's mind. A grand exposure where she would stand victorious amidst the ruins of deceit. Imagine the air thick with tension, each breath like drawing in smoke, the remnants of a once loving home now a battleground of hearts. The morning light, once a herald of new beginnings, now seemed to mock with its clarity, exposing what was hidden in the shadows. The wife, once the keeper of this domestic sanctuary, now stands on the precipice of a truth that could unravel everything. The confrontation was upon them quicker than Elena could prepare. She heard Mark's key turn in the lock, his steps light as if he carried no weight of guilt. But as he entered, the air between them was anything but light. It was charged, electric with unspoken accusations. Mark's smile faltered when he met Elena's gaze, her eyes not warm but cold, accusatory. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "What about?" Mark asked, feigning innocence, but his eyes darted away, a telltale sign. "Lucas saw you," Elena began, her voice now a weapon, each word sharp. "With Samantha." Mark's denial was quick, too quick, his words stumbling over each other. "No, Elena, it was just one time, nothing." "Stop," Elena cut him off, her anger flaring, her heart racing with betrayal. She wanted to believe him, to salvage something from this wreckage, but the text she saw on his phone, from Samantha, was the nail in his coffin of lies. "You've been seeing her for months, haven't you?" His silence was her answer. The kitchen, once the heart of their home, now felt like a courtroom where Mark was on trial. Elena's emotions were a whirlwind: anger, hurt, disbelief, all fighting for dominance. She felt like a fool, a character in a play where she was the last to know the plot twist. As Mark tried to explain, to plead for understanding or forgiveness, Elena's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle she had been blind to. The late nights, the excuses, the sudden interest in real estate, it all made sense now. Her heart ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the years of deceit. Then, the phone buzzed again. This time, Elena snatched it before Mark could react. More messages, not just from Samantha but from others. Names she knew, friends, colleagues. The affair was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern. Elena felt the room close in, her breath short, the weight of betrayal almost tangible. "How long?" she asked, her voice now a whisper, the hurt palpable. Mark looked defeated, his mask of indignation gone. "It's not just Samantha. There have been others," he admitted, the truth like acid in the air. The revelation hit Elena like a second betrayal. She had thought she was dealing with one snake, but there was a whole nest. Her emotions oscillated between rage and a profound sadness for the life she thought they had built together. In her mind, she saw the future she had envisioned, now shattered, the pieces too jagged to piece back together. Yet, amidst this chaos, a resolve began to form. She would not be the victim in this story. She would be the one to write its end. Elena stood up, her decision made. "I want you out," she said, her voice firm, the pain giving way to a cold determination. Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off. "No more lies, Mark. You've done enough." As he left, the door closing behind him felt like the sealing of a chapter, but for Elena, it was the opening of another, one where she would reclaim her narrative from the ashes of deceit. Picture this. The once familiar comfort of home now feels like a cage, every corner echoing with the weight of his secrets. The husband, Mark, stands in the dim light of the living room, the shadows dancing around him, mirroring his inner turmoil. His world, once orchestrated to his tune, is now a cacophony of consequences. Mark paced back and forth, his steps heavy with regret and fear. The door had barely shut behind him when the full weight of his situation descended. He had grown accustomed to the thrill of his secret life, the escapism from what he perceived as a mundane marriage. But now, with each step, the reality of his actions bore down on him. His heart raced with a mix of panic and a hollow feeling of loss. He had seen the determination in Elena's eyes, the kind that spelled the end. The room seemed to close in on him, the walls whispering the words he had never wanted to hear. Caught, exposed, over. He sat down, his hands trembling as he pulled out his phone. The screen was a minefield of evidence against him. Messages from Samantha, from Laura, and others whose names now felt like brands of shame. The realization that his life of compartmentalized affairs was now out in the open made his stomach churn. Mark's emotions were a tangled mess: fear of losing everything, guilt for the pain he had caused, especially to Lucas, and a desperate desire to salvage something from the wreckage. But beneath it all, there was anger. Anger at himself for being careless, for not seeing this coming, and perhaps a twisted anger at Elena for not being the one to keep him satisfied, for not seeing the signs that he was looking elsewhere for validation. He tried to rationalize his actions, to himself. It was just fun, he thought, a way to feel alive. But the reality was stark. It was more than fun. It was a betrayal of the life they had built together. As each message popped up on his phone, a part of him wished he could erase not just the messages, but the actions themselves. Then, there was the fear of what would come next. The legal implications, the social fallout, losing his son's respect. These thoughts made his breath catch. He could hear Elena's voice in his head, the finality of her words. He knew he was spiraling, losing control over the narrative he had so carefully managed. In desperation, Mark thought about reaching out to Samantha, perhaps to find some solace or to plan their next move, but the thought was quickly snuffed out by the realization that she was part of his downfall. The affair with her, once a source of excitement, now felt like a noose tightening around his neck. He felt the isolation of his choices, the loneliness of his deceit. The warmth of their home, once a symbol of their love, now felt like a mausoleum to his lies. Mark's mind raced with possibilities of damage control, but every scenario ended with him losing more than he could bear. The light outside began to fade, mirroring his fading hope. He knew he had to face the music, to confront the reality of his actions not just in legal terms, but emotionally. He had to prepare for the inevitable confrontation, the divorce, the public shaming, but most of all, for the loss of the family he had so recklessly endangered. Mark's heart was heavy with the weight of his own making, his world collapsing, not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating realization that he had lost control, and with it, perhaps, everything that truly mattered. Imagine the air thick with anticipation, each word spoken like a chess move, strategic and laden with intent. The living room, once a place of laughter and shared dreams, now the arena for truth and lies. The wife, Elena, her resolve steeled, faces the husband, Mark, whose every twitch, every pause, is a confession in itself. Elena sat across from Mark, her eyes sharp, dissecting every word. "How long with Samantha?" she asked, her voice calm but with an undercurrent of steely determination. Mark hesitated, a telltale sign. "It was just recent," he lied, his gaze not meeting hers. Elena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "I found emails, Mark, from months ago, and not just with Samantha." His face paled, the mask slipping further. "You went through my things?" "You left me no choice," Elena retorted, her voice rising slightly, the pain and betrayal fueling her courage. She pulled out her phone, showing him the digital trail of deceit. "Laura, too? How many more?" Mark's facade crumbled under her scrutiny. His emotions were raw, guilt, fear, and a desperate attempt to salvage the situation. His mind raced for a way out, an excuse, but found none. "It's not what you think," he started, his voice trailing off, knowing how hollow his words sounded. Elena wasn't done. "And the money? The money you said was for investments?" She watched his reaction, the way his eyes flicked away, another lie caught in the act. He sighed, defeat in his posture. "I was helping Samantha, with her business." "Her business or your guilt?" Elena's question cut through the air, sharp and accusatory. She was piecing together not just the affairs but the financial betrayal, the secret life he had funded with their future. Mark tried to explain, to make it sound less damning, but each word was another thread in the tapestry of his lies unraveling. He felt cornered, the walls of their home closing in, each piece of evidence Elena presented like another brick in his own prison. "I want to see everything," Elena demanded, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Every email, every message, every transaction." The confrontation was not just about catching lies, but about reclaiming power, understanding the full extent of the betrayal. Mark's emotions were a storm of regret, fear of further exposure, and a flickering hope to mitigate the damage. But with each revelation, that hope dimmed. As they sat there, the truth emerging like a slow-motion car crash, Elena knew this was just the beginning. The big reveal was coming, the exposure of all the hidden layers of Mark's deceit. She would not stop until every lie was laid bare, ensuring that when the dust settled, she would be the one holding the narrative of their story. Imagine the tension in the room like a storm brewing, the air electric with the unsaid, the revelations hovering like thunder. The once cozy living room now feels like an interrogation chamber, every word a potential spark to ignite a blaze of confrontation. The wife, Elena, with her collected fury, stands opposite Mark, whose desperation and guilt paint a vivid picture of a man cornered by his own actions. Elena's eyes were not just searching for lies, they were demanding truth. "When did this start, Mark? With Samantha, with Laura? How many more are there?" Mark's face was a mask of conflict, his eyes darting, looking for an escape or perhaps a way to soften the blow. "Elena, it's not that simple." "It's very simple, Mark." Elena cut him off, her voice rising, the pain and anger surfacing. You've turned our life into a lie. He stood up, his own frustration boiling over. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, she shouted back, her control slipping, each word like a shard of glass. Did you ever think about Lucas? About me? I thought we were just... It was just an escape, Mark pleaded, his voice cracking, the weight of his actions finally pressing down on him. An escape? Elena's laugh was bitter, hollow. From what, Mark? From us? From him? She gestured towards the hallway, where Lucas had retreated, the silent witness to his family's implosion. Lucas appeared, his presence a stark reminder of what was at stake. Why, Dad? His voice was steady but heavy with disappointment. Why would you do this to Mom? Mark's face crumbled at his son's words, the reality of his betrayal hitting home. I messed up, Luke. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Lucas said, his youthful idealism confronting the harsh reality of adult deceit. Elena, seeing her son's pain, redirected her anger. You've not only betrayed me, Mark, but our son too. What else have you hidden? Mark, feeling the walls closing in, decided to push back. What about you, Elena? Always so focused on work, on your friends. When was the last time you really saw me? The accusation hung in the air, absurd in its deflection, but enough to sting. Don't you dare turn this around. Elena's voice was fierce, her finger jabbing at the air between them. I was building a future for us, not tearing it down with lies. The room felt like it was shrinking, the tension palpable. Mark, in a last-ditch effort to salvage something, tried another angle. I can change, Elena. We can go to counseling. After this? Elena's laugh was devoid of humor. After you've made a mockery of everything we had? Lucas, watching the exchange, felt torn, his loyalty to his mother battling with the remnants of love for his father. Mom's right, Dad. How can we trust you now? Mark looked between them, his family slipping away. He could feel the end coming, his control over the narrative gone. I'll do anything, Elena. Please, just don't throw away what we have. Elena, with a strength born from betrayal, faced him squarely. What we had, Mark, you've thrown away. Now, we deal with what's left. The dialogue was like a tug of war, each side pulling at the other, the tension rising with each exchange. The big reveal was no longer about discovering more secrets, but about the confrontation of truth, the acknowledgement of damage done, and the slow, painful severing of what once was. This chapter was not just about pushing each other, but about the push towards an inevitable, devastating climax where all would be laid bare. Visualize the living room now as a battlefield, where every silence is a loaded gun, and every word uttered is a step closer to the precipice of no return. The air is thick with the unspoken, the tension so palpable it's almost a third presence in the room. Elena stands resolute, her resolve hardening with each passing second, while Mark's desperation grows, his world teetering on the brink. Elena's voice was low, controlled, but with an edge that could cut through steel. You've been using our money, Mark. Money meant for Lucas's education, for our future. She held up bank statements, her evidence damning. Mark's face was pale, his eyes wide with the realization that his financial deceit was now uncovered. I can explain, he stammered, the panic in his voice clear. Explain? Elena's laugh was sharp, cynical. You've explained enough with your lies. Lucas, standing by his mother, added, How could you, Dad? You've been stealing from us. It wasn't stealing. Mark's defense was weak, his voice rising in desperation. I was just investing, helping Samantha. Investing in what? Her silence? Elena interjected, her tone icy. Or was it more about keeping your affairs secret? Mark was visibly shaking, the walls of his constructed reality collapsing around him. It's not just about Samantha. It's about us, Elena. We've grown apart. That's your justification? Elena's eyes flared with anger. You betray us because you felt neglected? You should have talked to me, Mark, not into someone else's bed. The room vibrated with the tension, each accusation a blow to Mark's already fragile composure. He tried to stand his ground. I was going to tell you When, Mark? After you've bled us dry? After you've slept with half the town? Elena's voice was a crescendo of betrayal and rage. Lucas, unable to stand the sight any longer, spoke up, his voice trembling with emotion. This isn't just about you two. What about me? What happens to me in all this? The question hung in the air, a stark reminder of the collateral damage of their war. Mark looked at his son, the realization of his selfishness hitting like a physical blow. Luke, I never wanted this for you. But it's what you've given him, Elena said, her tone softer now, but no less firm. You've given him a father who's a stranger. The tension was at its breaking point, the room a pressure cooker ready to explode. Mark knew he was losing everything he held dear. His last attempts at reconciliation were feeble against the tide of truth. As the chapter drew to a close, the air was heavy with the impending climax, the final revelations looming. The dialogue had not just pushed characters towards each other in confrontation, but had also pushed the story towards an end where every secret would come to light, where the fallout would be cataclysmic, and where the true cost of betrayal would be counted. Imagine the tension now so thick, it's almost tangible, like a fog that envelops the room, making every breath heavy with anticipation. The living room feels more like a courtroom, where the accused stands trial in the eyes of his family. The air buzzes with the imminent storm of revelations, the calm before the chaos. Elena, with her newfound resolve, is orchestrating the final pieces of her strategy, aiming for a conclusion where she regains control of her narrative. Elena sat at the dining table, papers spread out before her, bank statements, emails, text messages, all cataloging Mark's betrayals. Her eyes were sharp, her mind clearer than ever. Lucas sat beside her, his loyalty firm, his heart heavy with the burden of his father's actions. Mark paced back and forth, his world shrinking with every step. He knew the end was near, the big reveal inevitable. Elena, can't we talk about this privately, for Lucas's sake? Lucas deserves to know, she said, her voice steel under velvet. And so does everyone else who's been part of your deception. She looked at her son. Go to your room, Luke. This part isn't for you to hear. Lucas hesitated, his gaze moving from his mother to his father, then back. Mom, are you sure? Elena nodded, her expression softening for a moment. I'll handle this. Trust me. As Lucas left, the room seemed to compress around Mark and Elena. I've spoken to a lawyer, she began, her voice calm, almost detached. And not just about the divorce. Mark stopped pacing, his eyes widening. What are you talking about? The money you've siphoned off, the affairs. It's not just a personal matter anymore, Mark. It's criminal. His face went from pale to ashen. Criminal? Elena, you can't... I can, she cut him off, her voice gaining strength. I've been in touch with Samantha, too. She's surprisingly cooperative when she realizes she's not the only one. Mark's knees felt weak. Samantha, what did you do? I did what you should have done. I talked to her. Turns out she's not as enamored with you as you thought. She's willing to testify about the financial support, the manipulation. The realization that his network of deceit was unraveling from within was like a punch to the gut. You've planned this all along, he whispered, the fight in him dissipating. I planned to save our family, Mark. You're the one who turned it into a war, Elena said, her tone final. And now, I'll end it on my terms. She pulled out her phone, showing him a draft email. I'm going to send this to your company's board, to our friends, to everyone who needs to know the kind of man you are. Mark's eyes scanned the email, his life flashing before him in those sentences. He tried one last plea. Elena, don't do this. Think about the fallout. I've thought about it, she said, her voice cold. About how I'll feel when everyone knows the truth, when you're left with nothing but your lies. As she hit send, the email flew into the digital ether, a declaration of war. The big reveal was set in motion, not just through words in a room, but broadcasted to the world Mark had so carefully navigated. Elena stood, her plan clear in her mind. She would ensure Mark lost everything he valued, his reputation, his job, his freedom perhaps. The satisfaction at the end would be in seeing him face the consequences, in knowing she had reclaimed her dignity and secured her and Lucas's future. The stage was set for the final chapter, where all would be laid bare, where justice, in its own messy, human way, would be served, and where Elena would stand victorious amidst the ruins of Mark's deceit. Picture this: the courtroom, not of law, but of life, where the final chapter of betrayal unfolds. The air is electric, charged with the weight of the truth now fully exposed. The once private battle between Elena and Mark has spilled into the public, their lives laid bare for all to see. This is the climax, the fall of one and the rise of another, where emotions dictate the narrative. The courtroom was packed, an audience to the public dissection of Mark's life. Elena stood, composed yet trembling with the magnitude of the moment. Across from her, Mark looked haggard, his facade shattered, his future uncertain. The judge, stern-faced, began, "Mr. Mark Sullivan, you've been implicated in financial misconduct, fraud, and moral turpitude. How do you respond?" Mark, his voice barely above a whisper, replied, I acknowledge my mistakes." Elena's lawyer, a woman of sharp intellect and sharper words, spoke next. "Your Honor, we have evidence of not only the affairs, but also of Mr. Sullivan's deliberate embezzlement of family funds for personal gain." As the evidence was presented, emails, bank statements, testimonies, Mark's world crumbled. The room murmured, the weight of public opinion shifting decisively. Mark tried one last appeal, his eyes on Elena. "I'm sorry, Elena. I never wanted this for you, for us." Elena's response was icy, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "You made your choices, Mark, and now you'll live with the consequences." The judge, after a brief deliberation, declared, "Given the evidentiary support, the court orders Mr. Sullivan to repay the misappropriated funds, with interest. Furthermore, due to the nature of his actions affecting his son's future, custody arrangements will favor Mrs. Sullivan." Lucas, sitting beside his mother, felt a mix of relief and sorrow. "Mom, does this mean we won't see Dad anymore?" Elena squeezed his hand, her heart aching for her son. "We'll see him, but it'll be different now. You deserve better, and so do I." As they left the courtroom, the media swarmed, but Elena faced them with a dignity she hadn't known she possessed. "I hope this serves as a lesson to all," she said to the cameras. "That betrayal has its price, and truth, its victory." Back home, the once shared space now solely hers, Elena and Lucas sat together, the silence between them filled with unspoken emotions. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Lucas said, his voice breaking. Elena hugged him, tears of relief and pain mingling. "I did it for us, Lucas, to show you that even when life tries to break you, you can rebuild, stronger." The final chapter wasn't just about the downfall of Mark, but about Elena's ascension from the ashes of betrayal. She had navigated through the storm of deceit, emerging not just unscathed, but empowered. In the quiet of the evening, as she looked around her home, now a sanctuary again, Elena felt a profound sense of closure. The satisfaction wasn't in Mark's ruin, but in her own resilience, in the love she shared with Lucas, in the new beginning they were crafting together. And as the sun set, painting the sky in hues of victory, Elena knew that while the path had been fraught with pain, the journey had led her to a place of peace, of vindication, and most importantly, of self-respect. The story ended not with destruction, but with the rebirth of their lives on their terms.